Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. This has been one of my longest hiatuses in quite a while. I apologize. I was visiting family, spending time with friends, and then I got back and I actually got a little sick. And now I have plans for the next 2 weeks because I'm in between jobs right now. So, yeah, this is going to be a fun ride before we hit like about the second half of September, close of August, close to the end of August. I will keep informing you about when I'm going live. And once again, for all the interim time, I'm still posting on Discord, still collecting all your ideas for future streams or just in general of things to keep track of. So that's a great way to connect with the community. And of course, as always, I am prepared for the big Apple events like September and stuff like that. But up until then, bear with me, unfortunately. But yeah, big thank you to anyone who is still finding the streams either live or afterwards. I know the YouTube algorithm has completely effed my last few videos because I'm taking like over a week in between them. And often I report on topics that are at that point a few days old. So yeah, I really appreciate each and everyone who is here or who watches afterwards. That helps tremendously. Obviously, if you want to support this channel, watch, like, subscribe, share, comment. Don't just comment live, but also comment if you're watching this video as a VOD. Of course, you can support this channel directly as a channel member. Shout out to Angelica, Steve, Max, and Jonathan. And you can also go over to Patreon and supporters over there. Shout out to Ben Vinny. That's all our MarkTech Pro Max supporters. And yeah, go to Discord. Follow me on Twitter. I think I've left the links to all of that in the description of this channel. If there is anything missing or you have some other crazy ideas, let me know. That's what the comment section is for. But yeah, we actually have a lot to react to because I've been absent for a little while. We have Rosa joining the chat. Hello, as always. Thank you so much for joining. This is a big one because obviously this is the first time that I would ever like use the term confirmed, which by the way, like I thought for a while that the guy behind here might be Tim Cook. I don't know why my brain just said, oh, random white guy with gray hair behind him with glasses. That must be Tim. But yeah, no. So let's actually focus on what is pretty much confirmed here, which is the design of the iPhone 17 Pro. Because yes, if you look at it, first of all, there are two phones here. This guy is using one phone to take photos of the other phone. And on there's also pictures from the front of it. They don't tell you much because there's most likely a privacy cover glass on top of them. I've seen some people discuss whether or not it shows you that the iPhone 17 Pro display might be less reflective or whatever. I'm just focusing on this image because I think this is the image that actually tells you something. When it comes to anti-reflective coatings or even a potential smaller dynamic island, this is the kind of stuff that Apple will unfortunately make impossible to see with the privacy glass that they put on top. Now on the back though, very interestingly, Apple usually goes quite out of their way to put on cases on their phones that kind of make them look last gen, or they make them look so weird that they honestly don't look like anything at that point, right? Might be like a random brand or something like that, or just a case so special that you wouldn't be able to tell the generation of smartphone underneath. Well, here we actually do have, especially in the comparison shot, not only is he using what is most likely an iPhone 16 Pro or 16 Pro Max without a case, but here he is using an iPhone 17 Pro or 17 Pro Max, and we very clearly see that the triangular camera arrangement is separate in this elongated camera bar, which again we don't see because the image is not that detailed and most likely the case on top is covering up most of it, but we see the LED flash and the LiDAR sensor being on the opposite side. This is pretty much in line with everything that we have expected for the iPhone 17 Pro generation. It also kind of lines up with the iPhone 17 Air designs, of course, that also have an elongated camera bar with a camera on one side and then an LED flash on the other side. But that's obviously a single camera setup, so that looks noticeably different. Here we still maintain that familiar triangular camera arrangement. Now you can love it or hate it. You can make arguments whether Apple is keeping it around for familiarity or for the equidistant triangular formation here. It doesn't really matter. It seems like Apple is sticking with it. Because of the case, we're also not able to confirm any of the underlying colors. Though by how many people have already leaked this, I would argue that those are also pretty much confirmed. The only color that seems to be still somewhat speculative is that liquid glass color, that whitish hue that changes into like a rainbow color-like situation under different lighting conditions. But yeah, between the white, the black, the orange or bronze. Now that's important. I don't think that it will be this orange. People are basing this color partially on the metallic lenses around the cameras. That's not really how it works. Those don't line up 100%. We also have still the question about how Apple will separate this glass cutout from the aluminum metal chassis, which the new 17 Pros are supposed to adopt. We still speculate that it will look pretty different from the actual metal to just differentiate it. Or, I mean, Apple could go a completely different route and use almost the same coating on top of them to make it look basically exactly the same as the aluminum. Yeah, we unfortunately don't really know, and unfortunately, these leaks do not show us. However, the overall shape, the fact that it's very similar in size, seemingly, that we have this separation of the cameras and the LED flash and the LiDAR scanner, that on top of all the other rumors that seemingly are confirmed, and they use that with like the biggest quotes you can put on top of that, yeah, that gives me more and more confidence that basically we kind of know the situation of the iPhone 17 lineup. We know that the base 17 is keeping the design of the current 16. We know that the 17 Air is getting this ridiculously thin 5.6 millimeter thick body and using titaniums to make itself more durable, less bendable. We kind of know that the 17 Pros are switching from titanium to aluminum to reduce weight, while Apple greatly increases battery. I mean, I say greatly, could be 7, 8, 9%, right from roughly like 4,600 milliampere hours to like around 5,000, but still there will also be better cooling in the form of a vapor chamber. So there are things inside the iPhone 17 Pro that will make it heavier, and that's why supposedly Apple is going with a lighter chassis. We also kind of know that the iPhone is getting thicker from around 8.25 millimeters to 8.75, so that's half a millimeter thicker. Again, you can like or dislike it. If you want really thin and really light, that's what the Air is going to be for, and we will later cover some of the rumored key specs about the 17 Air. However, that one has not yet leaked, unfortunately, so 17 Pro it is. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. As you guys know, I will be most likely getting the 17 Pro Max for myself. I want better battery life than on my 15 Pro Max. I want better cameras, which not only, of course, has the ultra wide been updated to 48 megapixels already on the 16 Pro Max, but now we're getting 48 megapixel on the telephoto. I did cover in the past a leak about like supposedly a super elaborate variable zoom that goes up to 8x. Again, cannot tell you if that is in any way confirmed. One could argue that this elongated camera island, which obviously also gives you more like three-dimensional volume, literally, that could be part of Apple just saying we needed more space for the telephoto camera, right? It has such advanced zoom capabilities. We just needed that extra space, that extra thickness. But yeah, who knows? At this point, a lot of that stuff is speculative. I think 48 megapixels is pretty much confirmed. Any other details like apertures, exact sensor sizes, that is still somewhat in the air, which is surprising. I thought we might get those leaks relatively early on, but now we are like just a little over a month away from these new iPhones and still haven't had it officially confirmed. But yeah, I guess that leaves either more for last minute leaks or even for us to get surprised, whether it's positively or negatively, during the actual event. There have been rumors, for example, that it's one rumor technically, that the 17 Pro might actually adopt a smaller main sensor. But then again, whether it's the 17 Pro or a future generation, that has also been up in the air. And basically, it would be just a tiny bit smaller, but it would use a more advanced sensor from Samsung, which is cheaper to get and supposedly has better HDR capabilities than what Sony is putting out. Again, a lot of it is very speculative, and a lot of it also is very unclear on, are they talking about the immediate generation to come, the generation after that, or are they talking about like a multi-year plan for Apple to switch suppliers or even design their own cameras? There have also been questions about, for example, the iPhone 17 Air and the exact battery technology it's going to use. So I still think we have a lot to look forward to. Maybe not necessarily all of the things we'll find out will actually wow us, but I think a lot of the things we might find out will still be at least interesting to finally have a confirmation on. Speaking of things that we don't know, well, Apple is going to answer them. See what I did there? Supposedly, and this is coming from Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter, I kind of missed it, so I'm reading the summary, even though I literally could be opening up Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter here. But this is a nice summary. Basically, he's saying that Apple kind of internally has decided to create some kind of AI search solution. So previously, Apple has really been apprehensive to turn AI Siri into like a full-on chatbot. And seemingly that's still not quite what we are looking at, but they have now an in-house answers team. And basically the idea is that for relatively simple search queries, Siri would be able to answer them, even for stuff that isn't related to on-device things, right? It's not like a command to Siri, like write a message or do my calendars and something like that, but it could access the internet, right? Now, whether this is happening entirely at Apple, so Apple has to even build a search infrastructure around it, or maybe it taps into some functionality behind basic Google search, but then does Apple AI on top of it. Not only do we not know, but a lot of it could still be up in the air, because obviously Apple still has yet to launch any kind of form of advanced AI Siri. And we know that like by April of next year, we're getting Siri that supports things like app intents, personal context, on-screen awareness, right? This kind of like answers approach of its own like AI search engine, that could be way off into the future. It could also depend on Apple buying potentially other companies like Perplexity or Mistral. So that is kind of like the going rumor of whom Apple might acquire. Apple recently announced their financial reports for the last quarter. It was incredibly positive. And Tim Cook also talked about in the Q&A portion of it, talked about how Apple is willing to acquire AI companies to figure out AI, and that they've already acquired multiple smaller companies. It's just that none of those companies are significant enough to really get like significant media coverage. Once Apple decides to kind of buy the Beats of AI, right? Beats thus far, Beats by Dre is Apple's biggest acquisition they've made so far. So if Apple acquires somebody like Perplexity, I assume that will get a lot more coverage. So, what is Bloomberg saying exactly? Despite philosophical reservations among some Apple leaders, the company is clearly heading in that direction. Basically, a direction of answers, knowledge, and information as a team, as a search provider with like an Apple stamp on top of it. Earlier this year, Apple quietly formed a new team called Answers, Knowledge, and Information, or AKI. This group, I'm told, is exploring a number of in-house services with the goal of creating a new ChatGPT-like search experience. Again, there's nothing crazy in here. This is also an explorative project. Apple might just be doing things right now internally related to AI to keep people in the company, right? There's a big poaching exercise going from Meta, hiring as many AI engineers as possible, hiring them away from companies like Apple and Google and Microsoft. So Apple might just be saying, you know what, if AI engineers right now want to work on search, they better do it at our place than do it the street over at Meta, right? And do it for Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg, right? Or they keep going to OpenAI and ChatGPT and just making that service so much better that Siri, while I don't think Apple wants Siri to really catch up to like ChatGPT 5, I do think that Apple doesn't want to get embarrassed by it, at least for general conversational abilities, not in a chatbot-like way, but just like, oh, Siri actually understand what you're saying. Oh, Siri actually understand the request you made of it. Oh, Siri actually can control your device like it was promised. And if that effort takes just like overpaying people working on something that, let's be quite honest, already exists in dozens of shapes, whether it's ChatGPT itself or rebranded versions of ChatGPT through stuff like Microsoft Copilot, or whether it's Claude or from Anthropic, or God knows what's happening at all these smaller AI companies. Honestly, I cannot begrudge Apple doing so because they do have the money and they do have the ambitions in the AI space. Even if they don't never even launch this service, at least not like as a separate entity that competes directly with Google Search and Bing, Apple still have that big Google Search deal that gives them almost $20 billion annually, right? So they definitely don't want to do something that hurts that. But that deal might soon be canceled by a judge in the United States. If that happens, then the question arises, well, now we don't make that much money from search from any third party. Can we maybe make search work, at least in some limited fashion, by ourselves? Again, a lot of it is speculative, but it is speculation based on top of what I consider solid reporting. I have criticized Mark Gurman plenty in the past on this channel, but I think when it comes to reporting on internal goings on at Apple, right, like restructuring of teams or hiring new people or losing people in general, or to adversaries like Meta, I think that is where he is most reliable and where he also stands to lose the most if he reports on something like that poorly, because I believe that if he reports on something like this and it's entirely made up, then Apple will actually come out and say, you know what, Bloomberg, one of your guys is actually like reporting pretty garbage stuff about us. Can you please fire him? Or can you please rein him in it a little bit? So yeah, I consider that to be like a very reliable portion of Mark Gurman's reporting. Speaking of Apple's AI efforts, Tim Cook also held a company-wide meeting to address the discontent, if you want to put it that way, around Apple's AI efforts. basically saying things like Apple must do this, Apple will do this. This is sort of ours to grab. Tim Cook told employees, according to people aware of the meeting, we will make the investment to do it. And this also lines up with, of course, what he said on the conference call for the latest quarterly earnings. Now, speaking to company employees already has a certain gravitas and importance. You cannot simply lie. Well, sometimes you can, but you really wouldn't, right? But lying to investors would be an even bigger deal. So the fact that Tim Cook now said similar things both to investors on a conference call and to employees, and it's not just Tim Cook, even though obviously Tim Cook is enough by himself in that regard as the CEO, but he also spoke through Craig Federighi. Federighi explained that the problem was caused by trying to roll out a version of Siri that merged two different systems. So that's Craig Federighi explaining why Siri AI, Siri as I call her, or LLM Siri, or whatever you want to call her, so he's explaining why that Siri version had to be delayed. They tried to merge two different systems, one for handling current commands like setting timers, and another based on LLMs, large language models, the software behind generative AI. We initially wanted to do a hybrid architecture, but we realized that that approach wasn't going to get us to Apple quality, Federighi said. That's very important because not only did he say something like that already in interviews after WWDC, but now, of course, he's talking with Tim Cook's backing. They've also basically confirmed during the quarterly earnings call that they expect this new version of Siri that's entirely LLM based to launch in 2026. They didn't give a clear timeline of early 2026 or late 2026. Thus far, reporting by people like Mark Gurman points to like a April-ish style release, so very close to actually next year's WWDC, which of course most likely would also give them some room to talk about this new version of Siri and probably their bigger ambitions behind it later, like 2 months later at WWDC. And we have our number one yapper joining the stream. Guys, I know that my schedule has been pretty chaotic, and I know that even today I'm not really streaming at the most opportune time for most of you, but yeah, Riley, thank you so much for joining the stream. I know that you are in general bored by AI talk, but I do think it's important to cover because I also honestly think that after this, it's gonna be quite quiet on the AI front for Apple for a while. Now, I'm not sure if Apple will have the balls to come out this year, either during the iPhone event or maybe during an M5 Mac event, to talk about this new version of Siri that's launching only next year. Because let's be honest, they will still have opportunities like next February or March to talk about it. But if they don't talk about it this year anymore, then I don't even think we'll get that many AI news about Apple. Of course, there is the chance that they spontaneously buy Perplexity or some other AI companies, or potentially multiple of those companies. And I will cover that, I promise. But yeah, they've restructured a lot of their internal efforts. They've now given pretty clear promises. They're not super precise, but basically in 2026, expect a new Siri. This new Siri, at least on devices that support Apple Intelligence, are entirely based on LLMs and what we consider generative AI. This will, by the way, I do have to warn people, this will have some downsides, right? Like when you look, for example, at the current model, right, that is used for things like setting timers, that thing is offline, right, which I assume most of the new AI Siri will still be, but it's basically instantaneous because it's a very, very lightweight solution. To me, when it comes to basic understanding of things like setting timers, calendar events, reminders, it's basically perfect. And it doesn't consume a lot of energy. That's partially why it is so fast, because it's just so lightweight. Porting all of these features, like setting timers, calendar events, whatever, to AI, that will potentially result in a slower Siri. Like there might be comparisons where the old Siri on devices that do not support Apple Intelligence or devices where you manually disable Apple Intelligence might do those basic tasks faster and or more reliably, but they might not be able to deal with more complex requests. So that is actually something that I'm really interested in because quite honestly, that's the only voice assistant stuff that I have ever used. I don't even really use AI to like scream to like my HomePod and tell it to set a song. No, I tell it to like set a timer or an alarm clock for the next day, right? And by the way, I put like my phone into airplane mode when I sleep, but I still, even in airplane mode, can talk to it to set an alarm for the next day, right? Obviously, none of that is groundbreaking technology, but it's a convenience that I'm used to. And I really hope that it doesn't go entirely away once Apple transitions to this LLM-based Siri. By the way, guys, I'm sweating because we have some crazy, crazy weather these days. Whether it was super cool for the last few days, and now it rained like crazy, and now we have super like annoying sun shining directly in my face even after covering up the windows. So yeah, it's very humid is what I'm trying to tell you. So I apologize for being a bit sweaty. That's about it for Apple's AI efforts, and I think that most of you are more not only in general hardware oriented, not to say that you guys don't like software. Obviously, we've talked plenty about things like the liquid glass redesign and just in general every new Apple beta. But there's also a lot of stuff happening on the hardware front, and this is coming from DLEC and shares that there might be about a big display upgrade in the works for a future iPhone model. It should be important they do not quite specify which iPhone model this will be, but by all accounts it will not be the iPhone 17 and not the iPhone 18 and maybe even not the iPhone 19. So basically the M4 iPad Pro in May of last year introduced a technology called Tandem OLED. In the most simplest form, it means that you have two emissive OLED layers stacked on top of each other, and they kind of combine their brightness together, right? That's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it's not entirely wrong. That allows a panel to be very efficient for like a low-level brightness solution, and it allows it to hit way higher brightness levels than most competitive technologies, right? A lot of OLEDs that go like into tablets and that go into smaller laptops, they max out at like 400, 500, maybe 600 nits of brightness. By the way, never like all screen brightness with bright highlights and whatever, like basically a pure white image, almost like what I have right now in front of me. Tandem OLED on the M4 iPad Pro, that 5mm thin iPad Pro that also has to cool an M4 chip and potential 5G antenna. That one goes up to 1,000 nits and very reliably, and up to 1,600 nits for HDR highlights. This is a fantastic panel. It's probably the best display in the world when it comes to many characteristics, because it combines so many of the brightness benefits that, for example, you want from like a mini LED panel, like what I have in front of me on my M1 MacBook Pro, but it combines it with the benefits of OLED, right? First of all, it's a super thin panel. One might think that, oh, putting two layers on top of each other will make it thicker. Well, if it does, it's still way, way thinner than any LCD that needs a background like basically lamps shining at your screen. But also beyond all that, it's extremely efficient. Unlike most OLEDs, it's not very prone to burn-in unless you run it non-stop at like 1,000 nits. But like if you run it at a similar like 200, 300, 400 nits, which is probably where you will use most OLEDs indoors, That will be much less prone to burn-in than competitive, similarly sized OLEDs. It also has all the benefits over LCD, like fast response times, perfect blacks that we know from OLED, and obviously now the rumor is, well, now Apple brought it to the iPad. There is rumors that Apple is bringing it to the M6 MacBook Pro in late 2026 or early 2027. Well, now the Elect reports that Apple is discussing with both LG and Samsung, which right now one is responsible for 11-inch iPad Pros, one for 13-inch iPad Pros, and for next generation they're supposedly cross-compatible. And now Apple is discussing with them about producing tandem OLED displays for a future iPhone. Unfortunately, it's not expected to ship before 2028. Tandem OLED is the one thing that gets me still excited about OLED, because in general color reproduction, I still prefer like a very well-tuned mini LED screen, but because of things like response times, I will still choose an OLED, right, if I'm given the choice. The fact that I get now the benefits of both in one technology without all the downsides of OLED, that is really exciting to me. In the past, I've really been looking forward to a technology called micro LED, which kind of how I mentioned that you basically have lamps or LEDs behind your LCD layer, right, on a traditional panel. On a on a micro LED device, basically every pixel in of itself is an LED light. Again, super highly simplified, and that would give you all the benefits of like pixel level contrast, instant response times as OLED, but supposedly without the risk of burn-in and with even greater efficiency and with even greater potential brightness. That is where I was like really excited, but it seems that because OLED is now so mass produced, so readily available in so many different forms, from smartphones, tablets, TVs, that it might make more sense to just perfect OLED and do crazy stuff like tandem OLED rather than work on this completely separate technology like micro LED. Now, could it still happen? Yeah, we know that like Samsung is working on micro LED technologies for super premium TVs and shit like that. But seemingly Apple might not be as excited for it as they once were. When you remember like a decade ago or so, we talked about technologies like liquid glass and liquid metal and iPhones being made out of this like crazy like space crafty material, but then they ended up using it only for the SIM card tray, right? And even that might be on its way out in the next few years. And then beyond that, Apple was interested in things like sapphire screens, but now they have ceramic shield, right? So there is a lot of things that Apple is interested in, but then over time, it's not that they are entirely wrong to be excited about a technology like micro LED, but in development of such technology, they might actually develop ways to improve technologies that we already have. Right? Maybe their metallurgical expertise that they gained from working on liquid metal, and this is not the liquid metal that's used to cool chips. But maybe that's what resulted in them making stainless steel iPhones and down the road titanium iPhones, and now going back to aluminum iPhones, right? Maybe their work on micro LEDs, what resulted them in being the first to get to real tandem OLED, right? Because that's important, because we do have some like laptops, like some XPS Dell shit that calls their laptops tandem OLED, and we're talking about like a 60 hertz panel that goes up to 400 nits. And I'm like, wait, what are the benefits here of tandem OLED? It performs basically like every other panel. We also have TVs that stack subpixels either next to each other or on top of each other, mostly next to each other though. And that's also kind of tandem OLED, and those TVs do get super bright in like the even 4,000 nits when it comes to like 1% brightness, like on a 1% portion of the screen, and then maybe to 2,000 nits on like 10% of the screen. But then they also only give you like 2, 3, 4, maybe 500 nits on the entire panel, which again, obviously that's a TV. It does have other considerations, like it would consume an egregious amount of energy to run like a full 77-inch 4K TV at 1,000 nits, full brightness, full white. But Apple does it at least on an 11 and 13-inch iPad Pro, and they do it with flying colors. The screen is brighter and better in every way than on the Pro Display XDR, which, might I remind you, has active cooling and has all those holes in the back to manage that cooling, and has this kind of thick level layer of aluminum next to the screen. Meanwhile, the Tandem OLED iPad Pro is a 5.1 millimeter thick product, which is majority screen. So whatever Apple is doing with Tandem OLED, they seem to be doing quite well. Their name for Tandem OLED in marketing terms is Ultra Retina XDR. I've seen some people on Twitter try complaining about marketing terms again. Again, Retina refers to the pixel density of the screen. For smartphones, according to Apple, it's around 300 ppi. With a different subpixel layout for OLED, it's over 400. Apple never gave us the exact number, but it stands to reason because of the Paintel matrix that Samsung uses. On tablets, it's roughly 240, 250, and Apple uses like 264 ppi. It's a little bit less on laptops, and on desktops it's around 200. That's why Apple uses like 220 ppi on something like the 5K iMac or the 6K Pro Display XDR. So that's just what Retina means. XDR is basically Apple's word for HDR that goes like above 1,000 nits, because Apple tunes its XDR to 1,600 nits. So again, it's HDR with a different letter. And Ultra is what refers to Tandem OLED. Super refers to standard OLED. But yeah, that's all it means. It's not randomly completely chosen words. I mean, you could argue, is Ultra a random word to describe Tandem OLED? Sure, but at that point you have to debate me also on like how Apple Watch Ultra, how random it is to call the outdoorsy Apple Watch the Ultra model, and how stupid it is to call AirPods Pro Pro, even when they aren't really production headphones. Meanwhile, the headphones that actually could be used in some form of production are called AirPods Max. So the branding here is not 100% perfect, never was, never will be. Just be excited for the actual technology and learn to look beyond the marketing stuff. If you're an enthusiast who knows the actual specs of the product, those marketing terms should not interest you. Just be happy that they are at least somewhat consistent. Now, we did talk about iPhone 17 Pro leaks, but let's actually get to the 17 Air, and I think we now are getting a more comprehensive understanding of the 17 Air's battery. Now, it should be important, we still don't have official confirmation, like we don't have an image that actually shows on the battery, like so and so many volts, it's so and so many ampere, right? So that you could get like a watt hour rating and you could translate those watt hours into milliampere hours. But we do now have an understanding of just how thin Apple wants to make this battery. For one, they're continuing a technology they introduced pretty recently on the iPhone 16 series, which is a steel encased battery, right? So basically, because Apple is worried that now that they are going more into the DIY space and allowing people to replace displays by themselves, batteries by themselves, they're afraid that people will puncture those batteries. So they made them less puncturable. Also, steel is supposedly better for thermals than the material that's previously used to house batteries. couldn't tell you. I know that steel is not the greatest thermal conductor, like copper and aluminum or silver, but maybe it's just the right mix of extra thermal conductivity and extra rigidness. Maybe if they made aluminum that thin, it wouldn't actually be that rigid. But yeah, I'm definitely not giving you any kind of like engineer's perspective over here. This is just me trying to regurgitate a few points that I read up on this over the last few weeks and months and years. Once we started seeing that. And now we have these images, and supposedly the battery for the iPhone 17 Air is just 2.49 or 2.5 millimeters thick, and it appears to be about half as thin as the similarly constructed battery of the iPhone 17 Pro. Now, we did get a few actual 17 Pro leaks coming from Majin Buu, that's his official website, and he showed off this basically the iPhone with the battery. Now, he initially thought that this might come from the iPhone 17 Air, but basically what we see here is this battery, so the thicker one from the 17 Pro. He says that was a miscommunication with some of his sources. The Air battery is a lot thinner. Now, one thing that I do not know if it's also a lot taller, how Apple is handling that. Is this battery actually thin enough so that maybe some other components, like parts of the motherboard or whatever, could actually go underneath or on top of it? Or if it's only just that thin, because in a 5.56 millimeter body, don't forget, you have the external display on the front and you have the glass on the back, right? Add to that some thermal systems and whatever, and that's basically it, together with a 2.5 millimeter thick battery. What's interestingly here is that if Apple made the iPhone 17 Air just 1 millimeter thicker, just from like 5.6 millimeters that are being rumored to 6.6, which, mind you, would still be enough to call it the thinnest iPhone ever, that would allow for Apple, considering they keep like the height and width about the same, this would allow for them to put like 50% more battery or something inside, right? And this to me suggests that this might actually be a silicon carbon or some kind of other form of higher density battery versus the very standard lithium ion batteries we have right now. And this also suggests to me that this would be a very standard lithium ion battery that we're getting on the 17 Pros. It literally just takes more advantage of the larger space inside, with the iPhone going from 8.25 to 8.75 millimeters. So there's more room for battery. So Apple is putting in larger battery. This being 3,000 milliamp hours versus this being 5,000. Again, we do not yet know the exact specifications. Also, this is the 17 Pro battery, not the Pro Max battery. So that is most likely in the 3,600 to 4,000 ampere hour space. Also, that finger, unfortunately, makes it impossible for me to tell how exactly tall that battery is. But yeah, here you at least see the battery in more glory. Apple, we had rumors in the past saying that Apple basically believes that 60 to 70% of people will be fine with the device lasting you throughout the day, which would be on the low side for current iPhones. In fact, it would be lower than the estimates that Apple has at around 80 and 90% for the other models in the lineup. So definitely, if you're expecting to buy the 17 Air, expect for it to come with a noticeable downside when it comes to battery. But hey, at least the battery looks kind of exciting in terms of like purely technological perspectives, right? But whatever Apple is doing here, like this could be a 100, like under 150 grams battery, right? It's rumored to be 145 grams, and that's despite it using like heavier materials than what is usually used on something like an iPhone SE or iPhone 13 mini, which were of course aluminum devices. this is actually rumored to use a titanium body to make it less bendable. So whatever Apple does here, I'm really excited, not even for this specific generation, but if Apple is now working with very high density batteries to put like 3000 milliampere hours in something this thin, now I'm excited about a potential foldable, because a foldable could have two of those batteries and give us 6000 milliampere hours, right? And I'm also more excited about an 18 Air or a 19 Air, right? Because think, if Apple makes these phones like a millimeter or even half a millimeter thicker, think about it. If they can fit so much in 2.49 millimeters, and don't forget, a lot of that is just the steel, of course, right? So that's literally more like in 2 millimeters. So now if it's suddenly 3 millimeters, so it's actually 2.5 inside, well, now that's 25% more battery capacity that Apple could put in there. And if it's a millimeter thicker, well, now it's 3.5, so that's 3 millimeters inside versus 2 millimeters inside. So that's 50% more battery. Again, this is very speculative. I'm not saying Apple is launching the iPhone 17 Air only to immediately make it 20% thicker next year. But I mean, stranger things have happened. I mean, the MacBook Pro returned to us like the MagSafe charging port. It brought back HDMI. It brought back SD cards, right? So who knows what Apple might do to make this a little bit more like a plus model. I mean, I also think that I don't know how well this device will sell, but it could have a unique appeal, especially with like women and people with smaller hands. Like at 145 grams, being this thin, this light, but still giving you like a full 6.6-inch display. If the battery doesn't suck entirely and the main camera is roughly on the level of the 17 or even the 17 Pro, this could be a crazy good device for a few people. I personally wouldn't buy it because, again, not enough battery, not enough camera, probably not enough cooling, especially versus the 17 Pros. But this does get me a little bit more excited. Again, maybe less so for specifically the 17 Air, but definitely for the future of the Air lineup, but also for the future about like Apple's foldables. Right, so again, you see the battery here, and now you also see the battery for the 17 Air here, now measured at 2.49 millimeters. Here will be the image of the heat dissipation adhesive, a key component in the battery's mounting system. So this is Apple's new mounting system that's easier to use, less prone to actually breaking the battery while using it. Now, it does require a special tool, but just once. And honestly, you can basically get a solution for that for like $10-15. And here's the comparison to the 17 Pro battery. Again, no exact leaks here, unfortunately. For the underlying capacity, we've had leaks before saying it's 2800. We've had leaks saying it's under 3000. So probably somewhere around there. Now, there's also questions, will it have more efficient or faster charging? This might actually be not as important, because think about it. Apple supports like 27-watt charging on a 4700 milliampere hour battery. If they give this device the exact same charging speed, right, with 1/3 smaller battery capacity, it will effectively charge faster per percentage. Now, whether it's the steel helping here or whatever, that's a discussion that still will be final to Apple, right? Just because a device is capable of a certain thermal output doesn't mean that Apple will allow it to do that kind of thermal output, that charging speed, right? By that logic, devices like the 16 Pro, which got that new battery tech, that one should be charging a lot faster than previous generations, but alas, Apple still limits it to under 30 watts. Speaking of Apple foldables, I mentioned multiple times the iPhone Fold, right? That competitor to the Z Fold 7 and the upcoming Z Fold 8 next year, right? That is, of course, kind of like a dual smartphone, or like a smartphone that unfolds into an iPad mini-like format. But there's also been another foldable that has been rumored for a while for Apple products, and that is an MacBook iPad hybrid. So think about how the iPhone is supposedly unfolding into an iPad mini. Here, an iPad would be unfolding into an 18.8-inch device, right? So in that way, it would actually have a larger screen than most Macs. This device has been really on and off. So seemingly, Apple worked on many foldable concepts, including this iPad laptop hybrid, the iPhone tablet hybrid, and the iPhone Flip, right? Like basically like one of those old flip phones, but now with a foldable screen. So Apple decided against the flip concept, but the iPad MacBook hybrid was still not canceled. It was just basically on hiatus in many ways. Well, now Jeff Poo, which again is not the most accurate leaker when it comes to actually like leaking stuff by himself. Usually he comes out a few weeks or months later and kind of reaffirms what people like Min-Chi Kuo or Mark Gurman have said. And basically he is saying that this device is not gonna reach a 2026 production target. So in that point it would have been kind of like designated for a early to mid 2027 release. It should be noted that when he says production targets, he refers to previous leaks. I don't think that internally at Apple, it has been a production target to make this fold for quite a while. I think Apple is all hands on deck on making the iPhone Fold, seeing how successful it actually is before they expand their footprint in the foldable market. And they're also working, of course, on stuff way beyond that, like new generations of Apple Vision, Vision Pro, Vision Air, Apple glasses that are like purely like, oh, connect to your iPhone, and Apple glasses that are actually a standalone product. So they have enough up their sleeve. While I do believe that they might eventually launch this, I don't think that they're like internally sad that they aren't gonna meet like a production target. And again, previously indicated, it's previous rumors. It's not exactly, he's not saying Apple yesterday decided that, oh, we are not gonna be making this. Yeah, but the reason why this rumor has always seemed pretty credible is because one of my favorite leakers, Ross Young, has in the past reported on those multiple Apple foldables that are in the works, and this iPad Mac hybrid has been one of them in the past. But yeah, this is this is the first time in a while we're actually getting more rumors about it. So. Yeah, it seems like nobody else is that focused on it anymore. Now, this is something that I will be definitely covering a lot more, but it's not actually a really big leak or report. But I do cover a lot of chip stuff on this channel, right? M-series chips, A-series chips, Qualcomm's chips, MediaTek's chips, Intel's chips, AMD chips, even NVIDIA graphics cards. But this is coming from, I believe, a Twitter leaker. Where did I find this initially? Oh, this is actually from Ice Universe, that Samsung leaker. But basically, he is saying that the GPU capacity of Tianfeng 9500, so that's MediaTek Dimensity 9500, has been greatly improved. The energy efficiency has been improved by more than 40% compared with the previous generation, which the Dimensity 9400 is very competitive with the 8 Elite. The peak performance is also very top, so I assume high-end, and the light chasing performance, that's ray tracing, that's a weird translation, has increased by more than 40%. Now, this is where I do want to give some nuance that I think this channel or this account honestly might be incapable of giving, but it's important to differentiate efficiency gains for ray tracing from efficiency gains for traditional rasterization. Uh, like the fact that these numbers line up so much, RT is improved 40%, efficiency is improved 40%. Now, why is that important? Well, for one, there isn't that much RT happening on smartphones, right? And even if it is happening, it's very lightweight. It's a very small part of the computational pipeline of the underlying game. It's not like a path traced game like Cyberpunk 2077 running on an RTX 5090, and even then struggling like 40 FPS or something like that. But yeah, then this account, while with rasterization, if you told me that, oh, efficiency is up 40% in a rasterization task, well, now I would be extremely excited because basically every game on mobile is majority rasterization. The reason why it's less exciting if those, don't get me wrong, 40% better RT, 40% more efficient RT, those are all great improvements, but we are very much in the infancy stage of hardware accelerated ray tracing, and these are the kinds of improvements I would hope to get, right? With raster, I definitely wouldn't expect the chip on almost the same node, right, N3E to N3P, to get like a 1 year gap to get like 40% more efficient raster. That's crazy. With ray tracing, because I mean hardware accelerated ray tracing is like basically 2 years old, like on smartphones, 3 years. It's a little bit older on desktop. That's why the gains, for example, from the RTX 40 series to the RTX 50 series, when it comes to ray tracing, are already super small, because ray tracing on PC, while still in no way actually mature, is more mature than ray tracing on smartphones. So keep that in mind. He's also saying that performance in ray tracing games is like more than 100 frames. Again, he does not specify even what the baseline is. So is it from 60 FPS to 100 FPS, which is a 66% improvement? Is it in line with the 40% that he mentions here? What's the resolution? How demanding is the ray tracing actually in the game? So the details here will be very important, especially in real world scenarios. Tests like Solar Bay really have been very hit or miss, mostly miss in my opinion. I think, for example, a test like Steel Nomad has proven to be way more representative of real world games. And even when it comes to the ray tracing space, Solar Bay has not been very representative of the kind of like very fast, very lightweight ray tracing that we associate with smartphones. But yeah, at least it seems like it's a good generation uplift. So I'm not here to talk it down, just trying to provide a little bit more nuanced. Now, speaking about Ice Universe, this leaker has also been talking a lot more recently about the Galaxy S26 Ultra, and this is actually a leak that came out just today. So supposedly the S26 Ultra will have some version of the HP2 main camera sensor. That's still a 1x1.3 inch camera sensor, still 200 megapixels, maybe some HDR improvements versus the immediate previous generation. Maybe, of course, it will be made better by the better ISP in the S26 Ultra. But the main improvement is to go from a roughly f1.7 to f1.8 aperture to an f1.4. And the smaller the number here, the wider that means the aperture is. At least if the sensor size is the same, that's the math behind this. And this would give you a solid amount, up to potentially 40% more light. I mean, there could be some rounding stuff in the f1.4, but basically expect the S26 Ultra to let in a lot more light onto its main sensor, which will help. It's also rumored to get a larger 12 megapixel 3x telephoto camera, up from the 10 megapixel one that it currently has. And the S26 Ultra is rumored to keep a 5000 milliampere hour battery, but to move from to move from 45 watts of maximum charging speeds to roughly 60 watts. There have been some rumors that it might be 65 watts, but yeah, seemingly, so the specs that kind of mostly actually have been confirmed by this channel are wider aperture, faster charging, but the same battery capacity for the S26 Ultra. That's of course on top of all the other specs that and a better telephoto 3x solution. That's of course on top of all the other things that we kind of take for granted for an S Ultra chip, like for example the inclusion of the Snapdragon 8 Elite successor, 8 Elite 2, or whatever they're gonna call it. There's also a rumor that Samsung might actually be testing the Exynos 2600, which is based on Samsung's 2nm node, which is a rebrand of Samsung's second generation 3nm, which is honestly the first node of 3nm that is actually dense. So Samsung's first generation 3nm, it's basically more a competitor to like TSMC's 4nm, maybe like N4P, and it's really only Samsung's second generation 3nm, which is now rebranded into 2nm, that's actually competitive with TSMC 3nm, potentially even N3P, and who knows, maybe it will even be some competition for the first generation of TSMC 2nm, but all of those discussions will be left for another day once we actually know more about these products, once we might get more leaks and benchmarks. I just wanted to react to that stuff because I think, of course, that there's plenty interesting happening, not just in the world of Apple, but also from Apple's competitors. And before I tune out, let's actually see if the new beta for iOS 26, macOS 26 and all that stuff is coming out. Might be coming out honestly tomorrow. So Apple often switches from like a Monday release to a Tuesday release once they introduce the public beta. I've had some people actually fight me on that in the Discord when they initially launched the beta. When I said, like the very initial beta, when I said there is a chance that we'll either get Tuesday releases or down the line they might switch to a Tuesday release. And I was correct, but yeah, it might be coming out today, might be coming out tomorrow. Of course, at that point, you will have to figure it out yourself. But who knows, if it's a big beta that's coming out today, there is a chance that I will stream tomorrow because I am visiting my cousin starting on Wednesday. And from that point on, I'll basically be, at max, I'll be streaming next Thursday, I want to say. That's not to even consider that I might have plans with friends at that day. So that might be a long hiatus, and God knows that the YouTube algorithm is gonna spank my ass for that. So I appreciate each and every one who still finds these videos, joins lives or joins afterwards or joins to discuss in the Discord. Let's see. Is there anything new? Blah, blah, blah. There's some regulatory stuff. It's some leak summaries. I know that like MKBHD put out a video about like iPadOS 26. To be quite honest, there was nothing in that video that I thought was particularly insightful, either in a positive or a negative way, right? Sometimes it might be insightful in a stupid way, and then I come out and complain about it for an hour. But honestly, I just thought this was mostly a nothing burger. Mr. Who's the Boss, I don't think has done anything big recently. I think that Telosive Tech is trying to do more non-Apple stuff, so I will refrain from criticizing Drew too much because, hey, if he wants to move towards covering a lot more Google Pixel stuff and stuff like that, that's absolutely up to him. Yeah, I can actually check what's new. I also see that my messages on my iPad are piling up. So I also hate the fact that like I just cannot do anything that reliably turns off these translations. I've changed like my language multiple times back and forth with English, and still it does those stupid translations from English into German. No matter that when I watch these videos, like you would think that with all the AI power going in at Google and YouTube, right, that they would at some point realize that, oh, I'm actually watching these videos in English, so why would I need them translated? But hey, yeah, it's these services are all getting so much worse, unfortunately. Netflix is like not worth the money really anymore. Disney Plus is not great for the money. Then you don't want to support Paramount Plus with all the shit they're pushing. Yeah, just to get like regulatory stuff in the US. The content I'm actually fine with. I'm a huge South Park fan. That should tell you a lot about me. Yeah, but there is nothing new here that I think I've missed. I know that like Greg's Gadgets, Luke Mayeni have put out like basic videos about like the leaker situation, and I know a lot of sites have recently started putting out reviews for iOS 26, Mac OS 26, and whatever. I have no idea why they're doing this. I mean, I kind of am used to that, but it's like 6 weeks until, or at least 5 weeks until those operating systems actually come out. We're like at least 2 betas away from a release candidate. That's very weird to me. But hey, people are going to do what they're going to do. The Exynos 500 inside the Z Flip 7, I've covered some of it already on the channel. Still waiting for somebody like Geekervan to actually do a really comprehensive analysis of stuff like efficiency with proper performance per watt measurements and real world gaming tests rather than those artificial tests. This really like guys, if any of you has like access to any kind of review devices or whatever, send them my way. Contact me on Discord or whatever. And because I promise you, I will give the device its actual due and actually like try to. I might not be the best reviewer in the world, and maybe you might not even be the biggest fan of the live streaming format for tech, but I promise you I will at least review actual games and stuff like that. Like while if you look, for example, at GSM Arena, they haven't even fully switched from Wildlife Extreme testing to Steel Nomad, which to me is absolutely incredibly stupid. Yeah, but that's about it for today's video. We've covered multiple topics in the world of Apple and in the world of Apple competitors even by the end. Obviously, we're still awaiting new betas in the iOS 26, Mac OS 26, whatever release schedule. We're 1 month away from Apple announcing officially the iPhone 17, 17 Air, 17 Pro, Pro Max, probably new Apple Watches. Down the line, we expect an M5 iPad Pro and probably MacBooks. Whether those M5-based MacBooks will be coming out late this year or early 2027, that still remains to be seen. I, of course, will try to update you on it as much as possible. I will be pretty busy in late October. So hopefully it's not coming out right then. Hopefully it's either coming out very early October or preferably like early November, because then I'll actually be relatively, I'll be able to finally actually make my time schedule. But that's about it for today, guys. Thank you so much. Again, if you're watching live now, or more likely you're finding this video afterwards, please leave a like, please subscribe to the channel, please comment afterwards. That helps tremendously with the algorithms. Please consider supporting this channel directly via super chat, stickers, or becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. You can also become a supporter over on Patreon, or just join our Discord, discuss the most interesting topics in tech with us, and and you'll get a lot more of me than you're getting in recent times on this channel. Thank you again so much. I'll actually give you big mark right at the very end, because I know some of you pervs only watch for that, I guess. But again, I'll see you guys soon. Let me know what else you would like to see me react to or watch with you or just analyze. And I'll check you out. I'll see you then for you to check me out. And this is Mark Tech tuning out.